So welcome to our adult faith formation session, and depending on what we're trying to accomplish, this is how many chairs we put. Sometimes it's full, sometimes it's what it is. But let me put it into context. The context always is the theme of the parish for the year, and this year it is living heaven on earth, discipleship as living heaven on earth. And you know, these days we have been focusing much on what it means to take care of our earth. And it almost seems to me that in that prayer where Jesus says, "Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven," it's almost like when we take care of earth, we're taking care of heaven. So in other words, that connection between heaven and earth and what all this means. So we have had events that would help our surroundings. Sometimes it's the home, sometimes it's marriage, sometimes it's life, sometimes it's the environment, sometimes it's... so we've been focusing on all of those things. So depending on whose interest lies where, people come or not. And this evening we are focusing on our faith and environment, and I could not think of anybody else to help us reflect on this more than Stephen Mackell. I've known Stephen for a few years. He is the manager, right, at Mission of Mary. And so is very deeply involved. And I think I know him more than just as somebody who'd be interested in this before. He's interested in the topic because of his job. He was part of the original, the second group of our discipleship training seminar. That's when I first came to know Stephen, and of course then I baptized 2 of his babies. Did I also do the wedding? No, okay. But yeah, and so I'm very happy to have him in our parish as well. Somebody who's resourceful on this that we can call upon to. So this evening, he's going to do 2 things. One is to talk about the big picture stuff, but then also to how can we then apply this to our own personal living and life. Sometimes, what can we do about the plastic in the ocean that the fish are now consuming, or the fish are dying because of that? Well, probably not much, but there are things that we have control over, and Stephen can help us to help us see how the connection between the plastic in the ocean and our lives. So the other day, I think was my birthday something, and they bought those balloons that you can, what are those balloons called? Huh? And I said, this is the last. I never ever get me a balloon, because this thing goes up and God knows where it lands up. And one time, I think for Easter, there was kids who got me a plastic balloon, and I think the kids were disappointed. I said, okay, this is the last time you're going to give me a plastic balloon, because it's just not good for the fish. And the kids are, fish? Easter? You, me? What's the connection? But at least they'll ask their parents about it, you know. Anyway, so the big picture and the practical stuff. Welcome to Stephen Mackell.
Thanks for having me. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. So as Father Satish mentioned, I've been a parishioner here for a few years, and my day job is working at an urban farm on the east side of Dayton. And so many people are becoming aware of what urban farming is or why it's done, but I kind of wanted to highlight a little bit about what Mission of Mary, our organization, does, because it's interesting, it's unique, and I spend all day doing it, so you have to know about it now. So primarily, and it'll tie back in at the end as to some of these bigger issues, but primarily the focus of Mission of Mary is kind of twofold. That's where it is for those of you guys who are very familiar with the east side of Dayton, but in the Twin Towers neighborhood. So St. Mary's Catholic Church is right there on Xenia Avenue in the middle of the neighborhood. And about 9 years ago, there was a group of UD graduates, and they wanted to live in an intentional faith community, and the Marianist Brothers kind of steered them toward East Dayton. And the Marianist Brothers also kind of helped inform their community lifestyle that these lay people were going to try and live. So they were going to try and do shared meal times every night, common prayer every night, and share their finances completely. So they were trying to live just as the vowed Marianist Brothers did, but as lay people. And so they picked Twin Towers and they rented a house on Nassau Street, and they all took normal jobs in the community, and they started volunteering in the neighborhood and kind of walking their dog up and down the street in the neighborhood and working on their car out on the street just like they saw their neighbors doing. And this is a very, at that time, especially 10 years ago, a very Appalachian kind of culturally identifying neighborhood. And I think one of the lowest, if not the lowest, income zip codes on the east side of Dayton as well. And so in dealing with generationally poor families, the best thing that they thought to do was to invite them over for dinner, get to know them on like a relationship basis, talk to their neighbors on the street. And the things that they were hearing from their neighbors was, you know, we have about 30% vacancy in that neighborhood. And the crime and the dumping and the negative things that come along with 30% vacancy in an inner city neighborhood were all very present in that neighborhood. And then the other major thing that they heard from neighbors was, we don't like eat healthy food, and our health suffers because of it. Our kids have diabetes, our kids are obese, we're obese, we have heart disease and cancers, and in some of those cases, it was just the families describing that litany of issues in their family. And in other cases, some of the families had started to make the connection between we eat food from the beer and wine drive-through and from the Sunoco gas station and from the mini mart on the corner every day. And when we have money early in the month or the first of the month, we go to Wendy's, you know. And so those are the food sources in Twin Towers. We are super lucky to have the Kroger on Wayne right there. The west side of Dayton, inner city West Dayton, is suffering a lot more with food access than East Dayton even is. But just recently, not too far up East Dayton, we had the big fire at the grocery store. That was in the news. And so different pockets of the city are suffering with the issue of food access. And so families have been, for many years, making the easy and convenient choice of picking something up at the beer and wine drive-thru or the mini mart or whatever. And we see kids coming home from school. Ruskin Elementary School is also in this neighborhood. It's a DPS school. And they, with their parents, it's 2:30, they come home from school and they pick up Mountain Dew and hot Cheetos, and then the family heads home, and like that's the dinner. That's the after school food that's available for the family. And as we got to know those families, it was, this is the convenient and economical choice for us, but we know it's not. They see the cooking channels. They know all this sort of stuff. They know about kale, but they can't make that choice. It's not the easy choice for them to make. So vacant land and low culture around food and health in the neighborhood. And so the idea for Mission of Mary was to take some of those vacant lands and put in large organic garden spaces and then distribute the produce that we're growing on those farm plots back to people in the neighborhood in a way that they could get behind, you know. So it wasn't grow a bunch of fancy food and then send it to like a fancy farmer's market in a suburb. It was grow a bunch of food that these people want and that these people can buy. So that's been the intention for the past 10 years or so. And it's kind of evolved a little bit into food production and distribution, and then kind of coming around the neighborhood and exciting them about learning this stuff. So two kind of main prongs for our mission. And maybe I can explain a little bit more the things that I've experienced kind of doing these different things. But primarily, the food production happens on about 2 acres of garden spaces, and we're growing as much food as we can. And then the interesting thing is how we distribute the food back to the neighborhood. And so we run farmers markets right there on Xenia Avenue in the neighborhood. And we do a membership program where people can buy a membership to our farm for the entire growing season. And so every week a family is getting 10 pounds of vegetables and has all these different items in it every week. And along with that, they're getting recipes and ideas on how to cook it. And so that's the way that we're kind of grabbing some of these families and becoming friends and in a relationship with them for the whole growing season. So we have families in the neighborhood who sign up for that program, and it's kind of a big commitment on their part. And so they're paying a membership fee every week. They can pay with their food stamps or they can pay in cash. And then we also have families who pay full price plus a donation. And so these are families from outside the neighborhood who really want to support the work that we do. And so they pay full price for their vegetables generously. And then we're able to subsidize the price for the other families to well below like the market rate for produce. And so in that way, we're addressing a little bit the food kind of economic justice issue of, everyone wants quality food for their family. But some families just can't afford to go to Whole Foods or to Second Street Market. And so for those families, we subsidize the rate way down to about a third of the market cost. So we just dreamed that up and we're like, look, these families need the food, but we as a entity also need to financially sustain ourselves. So our farm operation doesn't survive off of grants and donations, it survives off of revenue. So that's a really positive thing because we don't have to go to the well every year seeking donations just to be able to run our farm. The grants and donations that we do receive goes towards like our community education efforts. So new efforts in that front are our kids day camp that we run in the summertime with kids from the neighborhood, our teen employment program, and the new program that we have is we're installing backyard gardens for families into their homes. And trying to give them the seeds and seedlings and tools that they need to start gardening on their own. So those are some of the exciting things that we're trying to really engage the neighborhood in eating and buying this food, but also in this habit of culture of health and starting to garden on their own and starting to think for themselves about the food that they're eating. So, I have some pictures. In the farm, we give tours a lot, so if you're really curious about the farm and the work that I do, you're welcome to come and visit. We do a lot of like school field trips and things like that. We have about 1,000 or 1,500 kids and young people come to the farm every year and volunteer or get a tour. So today we had, I think 15 kids from Alter High School, freshmen, come and volunteer in the farm. So I know it's the first time many of them have been on Xenia Avenue before, getting a feel for the neighborhood and also helping in the gardens. So a lot of what we do is also kind of about exposure and creating a conversation about these issues for people that it doesn't directly affect. So up in the upper corner there, the kids camp, a third grader will eat anything that they pull out of the dirt. It's very exciting. It's the perfect age to get them to start eating some of the things that we're growing. So every day at the kids camp, they go and harvest their own lunch, and they cook it in our kitchen, and then they eat it. So the teenage workers that we have, they don't eat anything that we grow. We send them home with all this food. Oh, give this to your mom. Give this to your mom. They didn't eat it. And then a little bit, for me personally, I mentioned kind of the history of that lay community that started the farm. That was being organized and started when I was a student at the University of Dayton. And I didn't know a strawberry from a raspberry from a radish growing up. I'm sorry, Mom. But gardening and like me being really into cooking and eating this food and telling others about it, that was not something that I grew up doing. It's something that kind of came later in life, and it kind of came as a snowball after I got into agriculture and urban farming. Then it was, look at these other things around sustainability, sustainable energy, and care for the environment, and the different kind of popular movements that are happening in the green space right now. And then it was a kind of a reach around to connect back to my faith. I had learned Catholic social teaching when I was at UD and was really excited by what it said and by kind of the social doctrine of the church. And then all of a sudden, some guy named Pope Francis comes around with Laudato Si, and it was like a full connection back to Catholic social teaching through Francis and what he's saying with Laudato Si, all the way around to what I was doing on a daily basis at the farm. And so it was many pieces of my life kind of coming together all in one fell swoop. So it was really exciting for me. So I was happy to kind of be able to talk a little bit more about all that sort of stuff. And what I want to share next is sort of the way that my brain thinks about our faith and the environment, and kind of how I frame the problem of the big picture environment in my head, and then how I'm able to kind of break those down into little pieces and take action on the small things that apply to my life. So if this is helpful to you, great at the end of it. If you just listen to me talk about how I think for the next 15 minutes, then sorry. That's coming in the next slide. This slide is about the past 5 years that I've been farm managing at Mission of Mary. I've absorbed some lessons kind of very slowly, trickling, basically mostly through the relationships of the people in the neighborhood that I interact with. So the kids or the client families that we work with, or kind of the street people who are up and down Xenia Avenue in the neighborhood. And the fact of that I came out of college and then started working like a green collar job where I'm outside all day. So most of my peers are in office settings. But for me, being a farmer full time, you learn some different lessons, and you can kind of connect things a little bit differently to your faith. The most obvious one is anytime there's a gospel story about an agricultural thing, I get really excited, you know. The most like in my face all the time type of lesson that I've learned is I first fell in love with the magic of planting a seed and seeing something grow. Like there's just a really magical kind of experience of putting something that's dead and like a little pebble into dirt and then hoping that something green and alive pops up. And so when that first started to happen for me, and when I realized that you could then eat that thing as your own food, something kind of clicked in my brain, and I really liked it. The next thing that happened was that I turned around and I picked that food and I gave it to someone else. And so I kind of participated, not by doing anything special, but just by being present. I participated in like giving food and life to someone else. And so it wasn't that I grew this food, it was kind of that I prepared the soil, the elements and the environment, and God grew the food, and then I just turned around and gave it to a neighbor who needed that. So that was a really cool experience, and it's something that happens almost every day. And we have families, we have about 80 families in that membership program I talked to you about. And, you know, around half of the families are coming in, and they're coming in from the suburbs or wherever, and they're paying like their full price and a donation for their food, and they're getting this 10 or 15 pound bag of vegetables, and it looks awesome, and here you go. And they're like super pumped to get this food. And then someone comes in and they're paying $5 for all that food, and they're like really pumped to get this food. And it's just the notion of you're giving the exact same bag of food to different families, very different families, but everyone's getting the same nourishment. So that kind of experience of giving people that food that I've helped create, kind of that notion of I'm co-creating it with God. I think that's what farmers do, is they're co-creators and they're stewards in a very practical sense, and not many of us get to be outdoors co-creating and stewarding every day. I feel really lucky and privileged to get to do that. And the other one is that I'm outside every day of the year, and I'm kind of witnessing the seasons, and that's something that growing up and kind of going by an academic calendar your whole life in school, it's just like, yay, summer break, and oh, spring, that means it's track season for me. I'm a runner, you know. Winter, I hate winter. And fall, and winter's coming. But as a farmer and being outside every day, you kind of get to learn the wisdom of what plants are doing at different times of the year, especially the perennial crops and the perennial trees, and kind of learning about what the soil is doing, at the microlife in the soil is doing at different times of the year, and how you can both work alongside of nature to let things die and to rest and then to, again, revamp. It's just this beautiful cycle, and I just love participating in it. So that's something that's kind of seeped into me over the past 5 years as well, although this winter has been plenty long, I'll say. And then the last thing is I think Pope Francis says it quite eloquently several times in Laudato Si, but this notion of the environment as our common home. And if you just look at the microcosm of the Twin Towers neighborhood, I walk outside of our building every day and I go and grab some tools and I go out to the gardens, and a neighbor walks outside their house who is right next to the garden, and suddenly we're sharing our common home. We're both in this environment right next to each other. And so the fact that I'm very different from them, and we're doing different things that day, and I'm different from you, but we all walk outside and we share this same dome above us, that we're all in this like common environment. It's just really prevalent to me by working outside in the neighborhood every day. So that is like something that's connecting us. We're very different, but we're under the same environment. And that kind of can be extended to the plants and to the animals and to the other organisms that we're sharing this world with. And food, the thing that we all need every day, no matter who or what you are, the environment is providing that food source for us as well. So food is another wonderful unifier. And on a very practical level, we talk to neighbors all the time, and it's we end up talking, because they see the garden, and they're like, the first thing they say every time, oh, my grandma had a garden, or oh, my dad made us garden, you know. And then they start to talking about, what are you guys growing, and what's that, and what's this, and like gardens, and then like what people grow in their garden, and then what they make, cultural dishes from the food that they are growing, just become these tremendous unifiers all down the line. And so in our neighborhood now, we have Russian Turkish families, we have African refugee families, we have Hispanic families, we have African American families, and we have the Appalachian families. And across all those ethnic backgrounds, it's, oh, I had a garden back home, or I had a Russian lady come into the greenhouse one day and she just helped me pick tomatoes for 2 hours because she said it smelled like home, you know. And so it's just like these unifiers that we all have in our background, or we all have in our families' backgrounds. The food is like the easiest way to get people together. And not even just eating it, talking about it, or growing it. And so we see that all the time in the neighborhood. Okay, so we'll just transition a little bit, but I wanted to open up with a few different quotes, so I'll just give you a moment to read that one. If I would have not put Pope Benedict on the bottom, would you have guessed it was Pope Benedict? He has a lot of good ones about the environment. I think this one really gets at the complexity of the issue that many of us look at when we look at the environment, and we look at our faith, and we look at what our faith is telling us to do about the environmental situations that we have. Because it's this whole confused issue of poverty and preferential option for the poor and subsidiarity and like really pressing environmental and scientific needs that our species has. So, and you throw in a little bit of politics in there and a little bit of economics, and by the end you're really tired, you know. So we'll dive into that complicated world just for a moment. I like to break down the issues that we face into sort of societal issues and societal sin and individual sin. Yes.
Could you explain what subsidiarity is?
Yes. To the best of my ability. The notion that a people or a population should be in control of their own decisions and their own policies at the lowest possible level of organization. So like, why command from Washington what a neighborhood organization could do? Is that decent? So, and it can be applied to anything, you know. Give the preschool classroom children the opportunity, you know, it can be, you can apply it to anything, so, yeah. So just the same way that we look at kind of other moral dilemmas, I think, we look at, I guess you could use the issue of like, you could use the issue of abortion, and you could say, societally, we need to change this problem, and we could look at it from a government policy perspective. And then individually, you could look at, well, I will never, but I would like to advocate for people that I know personally to not have an abortion if they're in a position like that. And so it's two different ends of the spectrum, but it's the same issue. You know what I'm saying? And so when you look at a society that is struggling with a moral issue, there's always like across the whole continuum, there's like opportunities for you to get involved at all levels of organization. So that's just kind of how I think of the two different issues. So take the issue of greenhouse gas emissions. You know, there's policies that we could put into place that could help our society regulate how much greenhouse gases are being emitted. And then there's individually, I could buy a Prius. Like two different things, but working on the same issue. So you get it. So in the societal view, now we're looking specifically at the environment. The main one that people jump to is government policy. And, you know, you can think of things like appointees to the EPA, or you could look at, like the Farm Bill is one that's coming up for us farmers. You know, will the Farm Bill be renewed this year? And what are they going to hide in the Farm Bill? You know, that, what's that called, pork barreling or something like that? So, and for whatever issue it is, you know, these are elected officials will make the policy for us. So there's the elections and these campaigns. And then sometimes these last two are like at odds with each other, and sometimes they're not. So, but they're pretty interesting to like look at historical examples of popular campaigns or movements that have had a really big effect on society, right? So like, I wasn't old enough, but like at some point recycling became a thing, and it wasn't a thing previous to that. And then there was like the litter bug campaign, you know, like don't be a litter bug. It's like these are like popular campaigns that then informed policy, you know. Or there's Rachel Carson writing Silent Spring, this book that had a tremendous impact down the line on what the EPA ended up doing for the Clean Air and Water Act. So those are interesting things that kind of are at odds, but again, can work together at different times. Corporate and business, like we're aware of lobbying, and we're aware of corporate interests sometimes being at odds with what the people would want or what the people want for the environment. And so these are just things that further complicate the issue. And then if you were going to affect any of these things, you could write a book like Silent Spring, or you could write a letter to your elected official, or you could hold some protest like hugging a tree that they want to cut down. You know, so there's all different types of ways to try and affect that, but primarily that's like the societal view. And in the individual view, this is where I spend more of my time thinking, right? Most of us probably do. But a couple of like modes of thought that I've started to employ lately, the first two examples up there. And the one is thinking about, we come to the earth and God has created the earth. And are we guests of God while we're here on earth with him? Kind of talking about kingdom of heaven on earth. Or are we hosts preparing for like the future generation? So I've just had a couple of children. I have 2 daughters, and I'm now like thinking very clearly like about them and what they're going to experience during their life on Earth, rather than what I'm thinking about. Both are good answers, I think. Guest, you're a guest of God's, and how would you be a guest in someone else's home? I think you would act fairly responsibly, but being a host, you're acting even more responsible, I feel like. So maybe it just depends on your season of life or what you feel like resonates with you the most, but thinking about yourself as a guest or a host is an interesting way to think. And then the other way to think lately that I've been working on is is going camping. Has anyone been backpacking for like a long period of time or camping for quite a while? Yeah. So, when you go camping, you're not going to like build a giant campfire pit, throw your beer cans all over the place, string up a couple hammocks, and then just leave, and like wreck the place. And you're not going to go into the woods and like chop down 50 trees, make a big stack of firewood, and then just not use any of it and leave. There's a certain amount of respect and cooperation that you have when you're in nature. And you're caring for that nature that you're kind of living off of really well for that period of time that you're out camping. And then I was thinking, what are we doing in the world if we're not, we're just camping. Really long time. But maybe you make a permanent dwelling for yourself that you want to pass on to your kids, and okay, you're really camping now. You're like camping in style. And maybe you collect yourself with a bunch of other individuals and you've created a little town or village. And okay, like community and camping, that's great. And then you create like a place of worship and a dining hall, and like you start sharing things in common. Okay, now we have civilization. But at the end, we're really just camping. And so to leave the earth like desecrated after we're done camping is stupid. You would never do that. And so when we look at our individual lives, but our society also, and how we structure our environments that we live in, sometimes I'm like, this doesn't seem like camping. You know what I mean? So it's just another thing. It's a difficult one to like apply to every situation, obviously, but it's interesting. So the other thing that when I was at University of Dayton, I studied philosophy and economics, and in the world of economics, I learned a lot about the economic multiplier effect. If anyone's an economics nerd, but essentially, and I like to explain it in this way for this individual view, like your $1 that you spend today is essentially your vote for what sort of society that you want to see. So if you need dinner and you have $1 to spend, like if you go and buy chicken wings from Walmart, you're voting for Walmart and chicken wings. And if you spend your $1 on like a local restaurant with like maybe your friend or family member works there or runs the restaurant, you're voting for that restaurant. So like when we think about elected officials and campaigns and all this sort of stuff, like that's voting, but you also get to vote every single day with what's in your pocket. And so you can effectively pick and choose which companies and which products and which businesses you support and you vote for every day. A good example of this is an obvious one would be for the environment, kind of be like what energy source that you're using, or what vehicle you're driving. We all need to buy a vehicle at some point. You buying one vehicle over the other is you voting, and we all need some sort of power source. So you investing in one or the other is you voting. You can kind of take this and put it in any perspective in your life. Like you coming to one parish or the other parish is you voting, I really support this parish and what they're doing, and I want to tie it to this parish. So the vote, your $1 every day, it kind of provides a lot of power for you individually. And so you can start to preference things really well. Does anyone have like a really good example of a change they've made in their life, or a company that they choose to support specifically because of other things? No? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I shop at Whole Foods and now Amazon bought it, so I don't know what I'm doing with my money. You know?
Yeah. I was mentioning earlier the economic multiplier effect. So this is one that specifically applies to like how local of a thing you're buying. So if you buy something from Whole Foods or from Walmart, like your dollar that you spend will be spent again in our local economy 1.4 times or something like that. So like Whole Foods pays a couple of their employees, and then they go out and buy lunch, and that's spent in our local economy, and then those employees spent some of their money too. But because Whole Foods is shipping stuff in from national, most of their money or revenue goes to pay the trucking company and the warehouse that's in Alabama and the farm in California that shipped the food to Alabama. So like there's a backwards chain, right? If you go and you buy food from a local farmer, the economic multiplier effect is like 2.8. And so he's going to spend, he or she is going to spend that money on more local goods that they use to run their farm, and they're going to pay their employees. And so the bubble is much smaller because all the component parts for that business are much more local. So when you look at things that like bring a lot of economic activity to an area, or when you like locate a new business in an area, all those people get wages, and then the city gets all that money as income tax, and it's all great. And the more locally owned that business is, the more money stays in this region, and kind of, so you spending money there increases the economic multiplier effect. So this is kind of like a health of a communities thing, you know. We all have a bunch of money in Dayton, but if we spend all our money on corporations that source from really far away, most of our money isn't staying in Dayton. Most of that multiplier effect. The money obviously stays in Dayton, but your multiplier is diminished. So it's kind of like an extension of the vote with your dollar type of idea. It's like, I can get more bang for my buck if I support someone more local. So, yeah, good question.
The interesting thing is, if you ask most people, the majority of people would say, yeah, I'd love for my money to stay here.
Right.
This is where I want it to be. But in our actions, we think we want to do this, but our actions kind of lead us in a different direction. We don't do what we say we'd like to do.
Yeah. And it's something that we didn't ever intentionally choose. Like, we didn't choose for our money to go far away. The structure of corporations and the structure of how we get our everyday items has just changed over the last like 80 years. You know, before World War II, there was no mega grocery store, or there was no supermarket, right? And there was no Walmart, and there was like mom and pa's down on the corner, and they had the hardware store, and then over across the street was the neighborhood grocery store, and then down the, you know, it's like our economies, our local economies have just changed into a much more like national system. And one of the negative consequences of that was our money leaving, and then like the aggregation of like jobs in certain areas. And then the other negative is that stuff has to be trucked all across the country all the time. And so, have you guys ever heard of the term carbon footprint? So all of our carbon footprints have just been getting bigger and bigger because our economy is becoming more global. And so anything that we buy is coming from really far away. So it's both, it's just sneaky, that's all. It's just changed. And there's nothing we could do about it But now that we know about it, we get to vote, you know. So that's kind of the power that then resides back in our hands once we start practicing it. And it's not, I mean, you still need to buy a toothbrush. And I don't know any local toothbrush manufacturers, but like, you can't do it for everything. You got local toothbrush.
Or fish for that matter, you know, local fish
Sure.
here versus in say Texas.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
One of the things that
Yep. Yeah.
Like Dorothy Lane Market has a number of local farmers, and they sell their produce.
Sure. Yeah.
And to me, and so
Yep.
you can do some of it that way. However, they can be more expensive.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's another
Yeah. And we could get really into food because I could talk all day about it, but as a population, we spend the smallest percentage of our income on food compared to any country in the entire world. And so we kind of expect our food to be really cheap and really convenient, really shelf stable, you know. And other populations, they just know that good food is expensive. And that's because they know the people growing it, or they know how it supports their economy. And the way that our food system has developed is similar to the way our national kind of distribution of all home goods has developed. It's just stretched itself out, and it's kind of aggregated into really big pockets, you know. So, yeah, but places like Dorothy Lane are attempting to glean their products from more local sources. So, yeah, good point.
How do I find out the ground meat at Dots versus the ground meat at Dorothy Lane versus the ground meat at Kroger's?
Yep.
Of which is the most local of those three places?
Uh-huh.
but I think now more and more if you ask them they will tell you.
Yeah.
So if you go to, in some places now they're actually telling you where it is from. Mostly it's national and not like it's from USA as opposed to China. But then if Dorothy Market, if you ask them where it came from, they're supposed to be able to tell you where it is from.
Yeah.
So sometimes, and I don't know whether Walmart will do that or Sam's Club will do that, but I think Costco may do that. You know, Dorothy Market, Whole Foods will certainly tell you, but I don't know how much of it is local.
Yeah. Yeah.
My experience has been that so we made a big food move about 10 years ago when I started learning about all this stuff. And I found that there were lots of farmers who were willing to sell me meat directly if I just found them. They don't have time to go out and market and all that other stuff. And the other thing I found about that is when you know your farmer who's providing whatever, you know it's coming from one animal, the way it was cared for,
butchers or people who are farm givers?
Yeah, it's, I mean, I could certainly tell you several farmers who I know, and sounds like Chip could too, but yeah, it's something that, it's really interesting. Once you get into local food and you start really wanting to know where your food is coming from and the person who's producing your food, they're very happy to tell you where to find every food product that you could ever need from a local source or from a friend of theirs or from, so it's this very small subculture of really local food and people who really want to support local food that's kind of, it still subsists and it still exists. And it's just that it hasn't, it's not as convenient, you know? It's not as convenient as going to Costco or going to Walmart and getting everything under one roof. It's just, and it might not ever be, but it's a choice that you can or make if you want to, and or can make for a while and try it, you know. So
It's a lifestyle.
yeah, it's definitely. But the problem is not a problem, but every single product you buy, you could research the supply chain for, and you could look at like what the environmental impact is of every stage of manufacturing and every piece of packaging, and you can really get bogged down, you know, learning about what's in your soap and where it comes from and what it's packaged in and what those little massaging beads of plastic ended up doing, you know, down the drain, and how wastewater treatment plants are affected, and like, it's terrifying. And then times that by everything you buy and every food item. So I think that the real emphasis is to choose one thing that's achievable and then go from there, you know. So yeah, you got some.
I was going to say that we have been trying to make the switch to local meat in our household, and I found this website called Agrilicious, and it's just a hub of live local farms, and you can research by what kind of products you want it to have, the farm to have, and then contact people in charge and start supporting them. So we haven't started, but
Yeah, there's
we're in the research process.
Agrilicious. There's also Local Harvest is another one. There are resources out there for food in particular that I know a lot of. But yeah, cool, great. I don't know if I have
What was that one called? Harvest?
Local Harvest. Yeah. Yes, and so in the face of all those things and societal and individual, we've kind of already been talking about it, obviously, but the things I encourage people to do, and for many of the families that we work with at the farm, it's, you know, what can you start and do one thing differently and kind of one thing more intentionally that's a habit that you can form. And for some of the kids, it's like, I didn't know you're not supposed to like let the sink run when you're brushing your teeth, you know, and that's their one habit that they can change. And for your guys' family, it's how can we source our meat more locally? But there's also all these connections back to our faith and more intentional lifestyle and the motivation behind why we do these things. And so as you're doing your one new habit, you can try and read and learn one new thing. You dive down the rabbit hole of food. You had to do a lot of reading and so forth. But if you're reading about one thing and you're actively doing one thing, you're doing something on both fronts. And if you're reflecting and praying about it and you're spending some time outside in nature, you're kind of connecting all the dots, I think. And so that's what my family has tried to do the last couple of years, is affect change in small little increments, but at the same time always like knowing why we're doing those changes, not just because it's cool or not just because it sounds like everyone else is doing it, but why are we choosing to do this different thing, and how does it connect to the intentional lifestyle or the motivations in our faith and in caring for the environment or in caring for the most marginalized people in our city? Why are we doing these changes? So I think we should just turn this into a little sharing experience exercise. I have some little sheets for you guys that include a bunch of tips, and there's snacks.